Welcome to lesson 2 of GCSE Sociology at the Warrener. Today's lesson is learning some key concepts that we're going to use all the way through your 2 years of sociology. So by the end of the lesson, I'd like you to be able to make sure that you know what the terms culture, norms and values mean. And this is how they might be used by sociologists. So words that you might use in everyday language, in everyday context, but this is specifically how sociologists might use it. So please, in your notes, pop the title, the day and your objective, culture, norms and values, and our learning objective is to be able to define these key terms as used by sociologists. Okay, first one then is culture. So your definition is there in bold and italics. If you want to jot that down in your notes so you've always got it to remember, that would be great. So culture is the language, beliefs, values, customs and roles that make up the way of life of any society. So your culture is your way of life, the language that you speak and how you speak it, the beliefs that you have, the things that you think are important, your values, your attitudes, your customs, your traditions, and the roles, the parts that you play in society, and the things that you do with your time. And every society will have its own culture and have its own set of beliefs and values and customs. Different cultures may exist because of geography or nationality. So, for example, British culture might be different to French culture or Italian culture or American culture. So, we might have a sense of geography about our culture. Also, cultures are different over time. So, the beliefs and values that we have in our society now are very different to those that people might have had 200 years ago. So culture is not something that's static, it's not something that's fixed, it's not something that never changes. It's always being shaped and evolved and changing over time. Little task for you to write down. So question number 1 in your notes. Can you think of a difference between British culture and that of another place? And just jot down that answer. Full sentences might help you when you come back to look over this. And you can pause the PowerPoint here or the YouTube clip. Second concept then for us is values. So our values and your personal values are your beliefs about what you think is right or wrong, what you think is important, what you want to achieve. And for sociologists, they believe that societies share their values. So a society will have a set of values that everyone or almost everyone might believe in. So British values, an example might be something like democracy, and we believe in people to have freedom to have the vote and choose who they want to represent them in power. Couple of questions for you to kind of pause and have a think about and jot your answers down too. Can you think of any more shared values in British society? Are there things that most people in Britain believe in, think are important, things that they think are right or wrong? Number 3, how might values have changed over time? So if you think back 50 years or 100 years or 500 years, are there things that we think are important now that they wouldn't have thought were important 50 years ago? And vice versa. Do we have different values? Perhaps, and this links into question number 4, do you have different values from your parents or your grandparents? How might that have been shaped by the society that they grew up in? And then the third and final concept is the idea of a norm. So our values, what we believe is important, shapes how we behave. So our norms are our expected ways of behaving, often unwritten rules that govern our behaviour. If I give you an example, what I want you to do is think about these 4 situations. So the supermarket, school lesson, the doctor's waiting room, and the restaurant. I want you to think of all of this pre-coronavirus, so pre-COVID, before COVID came into our world. What were the kind of unwritten rules in each of these situations. So if I give you some examples for the supermarket one, a norm in the supermarket, you are expected to queue. You are expected to queue at the checkout. You don't just barge your way to the front and put all your stuff on the conveyor and push other people out of the way. You're expected to pay. That's a norm. That's an expectation. It's a written rule. You'd be breaking the law if you didn't pay, but it's also kind of just what we're expected to do. You don't just randomly go and start taking things out of other people's trolleys. That would be considered weird. So the norms are the unwritten rules that we have that shape our behaviour. Can you copy out this little table, shouldn't take you very long, and jot down in each for each one, 2 or 3 norms in each of those situations? So what are you expected to do in a school lesson? What are the norms? What are the expectations on you? What about in a doctor's waiting room? Have a think about that one. If you're waiting to go and see the doctor, what are the norms? What are the expectations? And in a restaurant, again, imagine they're open, imagine there's no coronavirus. What are the expectations when you're eating out in a restaurant? And then just to sort of pull it all together, really, there is a link between these 3 concepts, and hopefully it will become more clear as time goes on. So don't worry, it's almost like learning a new language the first few weeks of sociology. Your norms and values are the building blocks of a culture. So those who have a shared culture will follow the same norms and values. So for example, British culture might have a particular set of norms and values that's different to French culture or American culture. There's a clip here on the YouTube link, and I'll pop it on the playlist if you're on the YouTube channel watching the video instead. HSBC did a whole load of adverts a couple of years ago talking about how there are different expectations and norms essentially between different cultures. They didn't realise they were actually doing a good bit of sociology. So just have a look at the clip, it's only a couple of minutes long, and see how different societies have different norms and values. And then to finish, final sentence or two to write down. Why do you think it's important that each society has shared norms and values? Why is it key? Why is it important that everybody knows in Britain that when you go into a supermarket you have to queue and you don't push to the front? Why do people know that in a doctor's waiting room you don't sit there and have a chat with the random stranger next to you asking them why they're there? What would happen if we didn't share these norms and values in society? So that's your final question to finish off. As always, challenge to finish the lesson on the next slide. So, for those of you who are keen, Golden Challenge task is more of a thinking one. Jot me down a couple of sentences just to show me that you've done it. But have you ever experienced a situation where you were unsure of the norms and how to behave? So perhaps you've gone into a new situation, you didn't know what you were expected to do. What happened? Did it have a good outcome, a negative outcome, maybe an embarrassing outcome? How did that make you feel? And if you give us a little insight into what happened, that would be great. As always, please take a picture of all the work that you've done, upload it to Show My Homework. Any questions, my email's on the Show My Homework post. Take care.